Julie Skoda, and welcome to day one of the Unison Pastel Challenge. We've got 5 days coming up, and I'm really excited to see how you guys do each day. We're going to start really simple. I like to take a little time and plan out my scene before I actually put pastel on paper. So I like to start with the view catcher if you have one. If you don't, you can also easily mark up the shape, but since I know the size of paper I'm going to work with a piece of Lux Archival sanded paper. This takes water really well, water media, so I like to use it, but anything that you guys are comfortable with working with is totally fine. I use UArt 400 grit a lot too, and that's another great paper. So I have my view catcher sized at 11 by 14, and I'm working in a horizontal format, which honestly you can try a vertical if you want, whatever works, and that's why it's really important to play at this part with the composition and see what works for you. So I have it sized for 11 by 14, and I'm just going to use my pencil to make the shape which will match my paper of 11 by 14 Lux Archival sanded paper. And so I'm going to look back at my image, and I notice that the horizon line is pretty high. So first thing I'm going to do is put a dot in the center of my square. And visually, when I'm looking at what I'm working on, this bottom of that tree on the right is kind of where that center hits. Maybe just a little bit lower actually. So the horizon line is where the water meets the sky, and that's probably maybe it's even higher than a third of the way up. And so I'm just going to indicate that loosely. The water hits the shore and it kind of makes a little bit of a V. We're going to start over on this edge and angle down to get that shoreline in. And then I'm going to work with the tree shape on the right, which the base of that is kind of right around the center, just blocking in the loose shape of that tree in general. Just thinking big shapes. The tree shape to the left of it is a little bit closer to us, so the base of it is forward. And I'm going to just block in that shape. It kind of sways to the left, makes almost this little heart shape, comes on down. So we've got this loose shape, doesn't have to be too detailed. We have these beautiful tropical plantings, kind of wild, near the sandy area. So it's just kind of looking for the contour shape of those plants. This is all going to be very textural once we start to paint it very loose. So I'm just thinking about where the light and dark shapes are. There's a nice shadow shape coming in through here. There's some beautiful grasses in this area. Come down and angle up, hit that edge. There's a little bit of lightness of the sand peeking through. And then just some random shapes of plants down here. So pretty loose, a lot of just line drawing, which you'll want to keep in mind for when we apply this to our sanded paper. So next I want to put value to these shapes. You can use your pencil and lightly shade in 3 values. I find it's easier to work with grayscale markers, so if you have those available, that's a really easy way to do the next step. I use the Tombow grayscale markers, so I've got N65, 75, and 55. So I'm going to start with the lightest value of these. And I've established that the sky and some of this foreground are the lightest values. I'm just going to test it here. Yep, that's the lighter value. So I'm going to put it in the sky. Just get that shape really nice and solid. Got some of that value in the foreground with those grasses a little bit. Some of these plantings in this shape. So I've got a little area here that's fairly light in value. And I think the lightest value is right underneath this tree in the foreground. So I'm going to just leave that the white of the paper. So next I'm going to go a little bit deeper and into the water. Establish a nice shape there where it hits the edge up here coming through. We have some of that value coming down into the grassy areas. And into the foreground. A little bit of it more back up by this tree, keeping that area light, this little foreground light. And then I'm going to use my darkest value for the darks. And the darkest part of this painting are these tree shapes. So I'm going to fill that in pretty solid. There's some darker shadows coming off of it. I'm gonna go in and throw that in, that shape. There's a few darks in that spot. It's warmer and brighter in this foreground, but I'm gonna fill it in as a dark shape for right now. And then I like to take the marker and just frame it out. Get that shape enclosed. And then I've got a nice valued shape start for my next step, where I'm going to apply it to the sanded paper. Then I want to attach my sanded paper to backing board. And there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm going to use tape. It uses a lot of tape, but I like keeping the entire surface of the paper exposed. Some people like to use staplers, staple their paper to the board. Some people like to tape on top. I'm using a hinge method, so I flip the paper upside down, and I'm going to put paper on all four sides. So you can see that it's overlapping the back of the paper, and then the sticky part of the tape is exposed halfway. So flip it over, and you can use any kind of tape. I'm using black artist tape with a black board today, but masking tape works fine. Anything with a little stick. I don't like painter's tape, the blue painter's tape. It's a little too contrasty and shocking with your painting to have that bright blue shining. So if you have just a plain, beige masking tape, white artist tape, that all works great. Okay, so we have our paper taped to our surface, and I'm going to put it up right now on an easel. And I like to have my easel pretty straight. Part of that is just when we get to the part where we're going to add pastel, the dust falls down straight, doesn't land on your painting, and I usually, when we get to adding the pastel, I'll put a piece of newsprint underneath to collect any of the dust. You can save it, or you can throw it away, easily throw it away for easy cleanup. So I'm going to use this as my guide and recreate the same scene on my paper. I'm going to use a pastel pencil for this part, and so starting right back where we did like when we did our small sketch, that dot in the center, and then establish my horizon line, which is above the center. Thinking about that tree shape, which came. Actually, first let's put in the water line in the landmass and make it a nice soft triangle. And then that tree line, it kind of came a little bit past center, up into this space. Very rough. This stuff is just rough, big shapes at that point. The next tree is a little bit closer to us in the foreground, overlaps a little bit. And it makes a nice heart shape and comes down. So we've got our big darks established, our water and our sky, and then just thinking, really just contourally thinking about some of these plants growing. Just getting the big size and shapes of these plants. Thinking about those grasses. And the fun little growth in the foreground. So very simplified. This just helps me as a guideline as I'm going. And tomorrow we're going to move on and add watercolor for the underpainting.